Coming up on UGTV. A special session of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas.
We're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. We had a couple of commissioners call and say they were running a bit late, so we will go ahead and start without them. But we will ask Ms. Cobbins to announce the meeting and call the roll.
A special session has been held on Thursday, November 12th, 2015 at 5 o'clock p.m. in the fifth floor conference room regarding a presentation by CVB, gaming legislation, and tax lit. Roll call. Mugia, Johnson. Here. Kane. Markley. Here. Walters. Here. Philbrook. Bynum. Here. Walker.
Here.
Townsend. McKiernan.
Here.
Holland.
Here. All right, thank you very much. Tonight we're going to have a presentation from Ms. Bridget Job with the Convention and Visitors Bureau. Welcome.
Thank you.
I appreciate your being here today, and we'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Doug, do you want to say anything, or you want me to go ahead and go?
Well, I can start, but I think Bridget's got this laid out. We'd just talked earlier in the year, as we had talked with governing body, when we were doing a lot of look at the CVB, that toward this time of the year, Bridget would come and give us kind of a recap of activities that were going on at the CVB, run through things, and then we were going to have a little bit more discussion on objectives and measurable goals, which the commission had expressed a little bit more concern about getting an understanding about where we're going with the CVB in the future. And as you're all aware, we have a contract that runs through 2016, so it was kind of getting our hands around that as we moved into future years. So, Bridget, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Did everyone get a packet? I'm not sure. Commissioner Johnson, did you get one?
No.
Oh, I passed that around. Thank you. I'm very excited to be here today to be able to share with you what it is the Convention and Visitors Bureau does to market the city to visitors. And today I'm not only going to share what we do, but I'm going to share a little bit of how we do it, how we measure our success, and then answer some questions. As Doug said, we will be back for our year-end report. Probably I'm thinking sometime in January and February, but I am going to give you some of the preliminary results today. We have a very specific mission with the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and every project we do is held up to this mission statement. The end goal of every strategy that comes from the CVB is to increase visitor spending of new dollars in this community. So we are constantly asking ourselves in the office if the dollars we are spending on any project or the staff time we're dedicating, because sometimes it's just staff time, is going to result in increased hotel stays or visitor spending. Just to remind you a little bit about the CVB as it's structured, we're a 501c6 organization with a 12-person board of directors. And per our contract with the unified government, 1/3 or 4 members of the 12 directors are from the UG. I've listed here the 2016 board of directors, and as you can see, they represent the different hospitality categories such as attractions, dining, retail. We do have a couple of directors down at the bottom whose terms are ending at the end of 2015. And I would like to point out Chris Brown, who most of you know from the Kansas City T-Bones, has been on our board for several years. He's been our chair for the last 2 years, and he's been a really great leader for this organization, and he's just a great cheerleader for this community. Also, I do want to point out that this board of directors is conducting a day-long planning session this December to talk about our strategic plans and goals. I also want to point out our CVB team. They are hiding back here behind me. Most of you know me because I'm the one that's always up here in front of you, but I want to make sure that you know Mayla Yang, Carrie Green, and Rebecca Boffman. All 3 of these ladies are Wyandotte County residents. They're passionate about their jobs, their community, and they are very much leaders in the tourism community. So that's the people who makes up this organization. Over the past year or so, there have been a lot of discussions in commission meetings about the CVB and what we do and our outcomes. It's important for you to know that we went back and we reviewed every commission meeting, and we took notes on any concerns, questions, suggestions, ideas that you may have brought up. And then we, as the staff, and then as the full board, discussed each one. We talked about what we had done in the past, what we were currently doing, how could we better address it for the future, and if there were any changes that were going to be made. We also explored some ways that we could better communicate to you as the commission what we are doing. So as I go through the following slides, I'm going to identify some improvements and some ongoing conversations that we have. Each year when the CVB submits our annual budget, in the past we have also submitted a 20-plus page marketing plan. And in great detail, it has covered what we do, why we do it, and how we are going to carry it out the next year. We'd also would include some metrics from the previous year. What we realized in reviewing that is that our message was getting lost in this overabundance of information. So this year, when we submitted our 2016 budget to the UG, and you have this in your packet, we changed the format for our annual marketing plan. We cut it down to 3 pages and put it in a bulleted layout. The objectives are not new, they're just laid out differently, and these strategies we will change as we evolve every year. You can see up here we have 6 objectives. And in your packet, those are numbered for convenience. They're not numbered for necessarily a ranking of importance. We just needed to number them in some way so we could identify them. And the first 3 objectives up here identify the type of visitors we are working to attract. And I'm going to talk about these more a little bit later in this presentation. But those are the leisure travelers, the group and business travelers, and we want to attract the sports and special events. Our 4th objective is to educate local residents. We are a major destination for all kinds of reunions, and we are a major destination for what we call the VFR market. That's visiting friends and relatives. And we know that our own residents need to know what there is to do, plus the economic impact of keeping their business here in the city. We also support tourism product development. To keep visitors returning, we need new and expanded product that we can market. And then we also want to take an active role in the bigger picture, the bigger tourism picture. The CVB is the voice for tourism at the regional, the state, and the federal level. And there are all kinds of legislative issues that affect travel that we need to stay on top of. So we want to make sure that we are a player at the table. So I do hope that this new format of the marketing plan will help you better understand our objectives and our strategies for attracting visitors. And by the way, that longer detailed report that we used to submit to you is now going to become part of our annual written year-end report that you will get at the end of the year. The next thing you have in your packet is a monthly report. And every month, a report is given to the Board of Directors about the previous month's activities and performance. A few months ago, we revised the way I was presenting that information into a written monthly report. And included in your packet is the September report that we presented to our board in October. So I want to real quickly walk through that with you, just so I can share with you what it is we review each month. If you look at the front page of that, and this is the second document that you have, it starts with page 1, and this is the overview. Do you have one, Hal? You got it? Okay. And this shows an overview of the major activities for that month. And it just will kind of hit on some of the major events or some of the major projects that we are working on. And then when you flip to page 2, that is going to provide all your hotel statistics, including the monthly statistics where we compare to the same month last year. It's going to give you your weekly occupancy and average daily rate and the comparables to surrounding areas. If you look at page 2 there, you'll notice that in September of this year, we had an occupancy of 69.2% compared to 62.9% last year. We had an average daily rate of $102.59 compared to $94.55 last year. If you go down, you'll see the weekly. We look at each week to see why were some weeks higher, why were some days higher than the other. We look at every day with that. And then we look at our comparables. And if you'll notice for the month of September, we had, for the communities we compare to, we had the highest occupancy rate and the second highest average daily rate. So we review that every month. Then when you get into page 3, this is where we get into our inquiries for the month. It talks about the shows we've attended and our media report. It says what media have we hosted that month and what media coverage have we generated. Sometimes that'll be a couple pages long. It just kind of depends on what's going on that month. Starting on page 4 and 5, it shows our marketing activity and performance. And this is compared to the previous month. So we show things like our website statistics, our online direct bookings for our hotels, our e-newsletter openings, click-through rates, and all of our social media responses. And then when you get to page 6, it shows our sales report for the month. What leads did we receive? What did we book? What did we lose? And why did we lose it? And what are we still working on? So this is a report that is presented to and reviewed each month by our board of directors. And when I come before you at the end of the year, you're going to see something like this, but in a yearly format. So you'll be able to see the entire year results. I also want to make sure that you are aware of several ongoing conversations that the CVB is involved with. I met with Doug last week to discuss annual goals for the CVB contract. And we talked about creating those measurable goals and relating them back to the 6 objectives. So we're still working on that, and those will be completed before the end of the year. We've also had some ideas and some conversation on the idea of the overall joint branding concept. As you will remember, the CVB has been supportive of that discussion. In fact, we had set aside some dollars in 2015 for that out of our 2015 budget. And I was at a meeting a few weeks ago with Mayor Holland, Wyandotte EDC, and the Chamber of Commerce to start that conversation. And I think there's a lot of details and a lot of discussion that's going to continue to happen on that idea. And the last thing is collaboration and joint marketing efforts between the CVB, the Wyandotte EDC, and the Chamber. Greg Kendall and I have met several times over the last few months, and we have a very good working relationship. And we are looking at some ways that we can better partner and jointly market. We've held a joint staff reception for the 3 organizations to make sure that the staff all knows each other, that they know what each organization does and what each person in that organization does. And I know that the Chamber is going to have a new executive soon, and so we want to make sure that we continue that relationship. And it is the goal of this CVB, and it is my personal goal, that we continue to find some creative and effective ways for the 3 organizations to collaborate and jointly market. So I want to give you an example of how we work with and market to the different types of travelers. Sports and special events we define as limited time events that often results in overnight stays. This could include anything like when we bid on an amateur sports event. It could be attracting at a festival, maybe a marathon or a bike ride, any type of special event. And sometimes that special event is not even held in Kansas City, Kansas. It's held in a neighboring city. But we know that there are ways that Kansas City, Kansas will benefit from the attendees and the participants staying in our hotels or spending dollars in our community. A good example of showing how we partner with a neighboring CVB to benefit KCK is a project that we're currently working on with Lawrence, Kansas. Lawrence is bidding on a track and field event for 2017. Kansas City, Kansas does not have the facilities to host this event. Lawrence does, but Lawrence does not have enough hotels to put in the bid for the event. So we're working with our local hotels to secure some of those rooms for them to put in with their bid. We're also working with Lawrence in providing video footage and some other information for a video that they are creating as part of their bid package to make the coming to the region sound very attractive. If they do win the bid, we will continue to work with our attractions, our shopping, our restaurants to provide incentives for those participants and those their families to come and spend their money here in Kansas City, Kansas on their downtime. An example of a special event is a car show that we've been working on for a while. And actually, Commissioner Walters first brought us this lead, so it's a great example for me to use. We first actually received the lead in 2014 for a show that's going to be held in 2016. And this is a great example of a typical process that we would go through. Our initial meeting with the organizers was in the fall of 2014. In November, we contacted 8 different potential sites, and we set up site visits and took them around to view and visit those different locations. In January of 2015, we found several of our hotels were identified as potential hotel sites that they could use. We definitely booked the business in March of this year and continued to work with them over the summer months on several details. One of the things we provided was the printing for a publicity piece that they took to their 2015 car show, which was held in St. Louis, and we printed that, trying to encourage people to come in 2016. We also had one of our staff members go to St. Louis to be at this year's show to talk to people about coming here. We continue to work with them on different details. I know we had a call on pet-friendly hotels and vendor space and camping and different things like that. So it's a continuing, ongoing process. The CVB, we provided many options for space. In fact, if I'm correct, Commissioner Walters, the site they had originally identified at first where they wanted to hold this is not where they ended up being. And if these organizers would have contacted that site directly, it wouldn't have worked out. There's a very good chance that they would have moved on to another destination and we would have lost that business without the CVB being there and being creative and coming up with some different ideas. So we'll continue to work with this group. We'll provide welcome bags when they get here and some registration services for when they're here next year. The last thing I do want to point out on this is we are the award-winning KCK CVB. We just received first place for our group tour planner at the Kansas Travel Conference. And this guide is something we use with meeting and event planners, and it can be downloaded from our website or we do print hard copies. I will tell you this, although we didn't get a trophy for it, but we did come in second for our visitor guide and for our meeting planners guide. Business and group travel. This is another one of our objectives with the CVB, and the business traveler is someone who's taking a trip for a business purpose. It could be a convention, a small meeting, an individual traveler coming here for a business-related purpose. And we have to work with each group differently because they have a different mindset, a different set of needs and goals. We work a lot with the Smurf traveler. And the Smurf traveler is the social, military, educational, religious, and fraternal groups. And this will include things like class reunions, Kiwanis and Rotary state conventions, a forum for educators, or it might be a church event. Again, each one of these have very specific needs, and we provide creative ideas for them to find a place to hold their meeting, resources for after-hours events, and we give welcome and registration services. One of the goals working with a business traveler is to convert that business traveler to leisure. If there's a meeting in town that we have worked with, we make sure that they know everything there is to do in town, not just what is at their hotel site or their meeting site, because we want them to extend their business trip, bring their family along, or maybe plan a return visit. And a big part of our job is not just the actual booking of the business, but it's the servicing of the business. An example of how we have serviced a business meeting that's been really beneficial to this community is a software seminar group that we work with. This is a group of about 20 people from Kansas and Missouri. It's not a large group. And they hold an annual 2-day seminar. When they first met with them, they were looking for a meeting space and a hotel for 1 year somewhere in the Kansas City region. While talking to them, we found out that they were mostly men and they liked hunting and fishing. So of course, we ended up booking their meeting space at Cabela's, and we found a local Kansas City, Kansas hotel that fit their needs. That first year, we did a great job of servicing. We brought them welcome bags. We gave them some ideas for some other dining that they could do in the area. And they will be back in 2016 for their 7th year. They were planning to be here 1 year. It's the servicing that brings the people back. Leisure traveler is defined as a visitor who is coming to Kansas City, Kansas for a non-business related purpose. They're coming for fun. There's a variety of reasons. It might be a family on a 3-day weekend. They're here to visit friends. It might be the girls getting away for a shopping trip. They may be coming to a race. We have people who come just to ride Varut. That's all they do is ride Varut. Or they're exploring history, but they're getting away for fun and enjoyment. Every destination in Kansas, every destination in the Kansas City Metro, every destination in the Midwest is competing for those travelers and their dollars. The CVB's marketing keeps Kansas City, Kansas top of mind as they make their travel destination choices. These people have a choice. A lot of times with business, you don't have a choice where you're going. With leisure, it is a choice. And we are the hub for all visitor information, and we provide a complete picture of all there is to do here, and we provide the resources for the visitor to find the information they need. We do that in a multitude of ways. I hope that you guys go to our website, visit kansascityks.com, because it has a lot of up-to-date information about things that are going on. We use social media. We're very engaged on social media. It's a good way for us to increase visibility and visitor engagement. We use print advertising, but we're very targeted in what publications we use. We target family-related or travel publications. We are spending more and more dollars on digital marketing. This is the wave of the future, and you're going to see more, and I'm going to talk about some of that in just a second. We have a weekly What's Happening e-newsletter that goes to our frontline hotel workers that they print out and hand to their visitors when they are here. Here's what's happening right next door in your community while you're staying here. We have a monthly e-newsletter that goes out to over 5,000 people who have opted in and want more information about Kansas City, Kansas. We're at various trade shows and festivals throughout the year talking to the leisure visitor, meeting planners, or group operators. We have the printed guide that we use. You guys have our 2015 visitor guide. That is if someone reaches out to us and they want more information, that's the guide we send to them. But we also have a companion piece, a brochure that is placed in hotel lobbies and in travel information centers all around. We work cooperatively with area bureaus to produce things like the Kansas City Multicultural Guide and different maps. And we provide itinerary and lodging assistance for motor coach groups. So those are just some of the types of marketing we do. So how do we know what we're doing is effective? And I will be honest, some markets are easier to measure than others. For instance, meetings and groups, we know what groups we've booked, how many room nights that booking generated, and the typical spending per attendee. The software company that I was talking about that's going to be back for their 7th year, we know, according to the most recent Visit KC 2014 Economic Impact Study, that a business traveler to the Kansas City region spends approximately $203 per overnight visit to Kansas City. So the direct visitor spending for that small group of 20 people who've come back for 7 years is $4,060 for every time they come here. That's the direct spending, not including any trickle-down effects. I know that a motor coach group that comes to Kansas City, Kansas spends $183 per person per overnight stay. A typical motor coach is 45 persons. So the direct spending of a motor coach that's coming to Kansas City, Kansas and staying here on lodging, food, entertainment is $8,235 for every motor coach group that we bring. With leisure marketing, we look at individual marketing efforts to track their effectiveness. One of the great things about digital marketing is the fact that technology allows more options in measuring results. I obviously don't have year-end results, but I do have a couple of preliminary numbers I want to share with you from this year. In 2015, we're using some new technology to help us determine our digital ad effectiveness. It's called Arrivalist, and it's a technology that tracks how many visitors come to a destination after they have seen our digital ad. Tracking pixels are attached to each one of our paid media advertisements. It could be a display ad, a mobile ad, an online video. And I'm showing you an example here of one of our digital ads we used this year. So if someone in Nebraska sees this digital ad, either on their desktop computer or on their mobile device, we are able to track when they have arrived in Kansas City, Kansas. We can track where they saw the ad and when they came here. In 2015, we used Arrivalist on digital ads we placed only during 3 months, May, June, and July. And to date, we can definitely track 1,170 people who have come to Kansas City, Kansas after viewing these digital ads. It gives us an ROI of $11.32 revenue generated for every dollar that we put into that campaign. We are dedicating much more dollars to this next year because we think it's very effective. Another advertising result that I want to share for you is our partnership with Visit KC. Well, that's the Kansas City, Missouri CVB. We do not have a budget to do TV advertising, and Visit KC was not able to include any of the Kansas attractions in their TV spots because they used Missouri co-op dollars. So we created a program after a long time of discussing this whereby the KCK CVB partners with Visit KC, and we were able to bring in a few of our Kansas City attractions as partners. We were able to target 3 different markets this year, and we used TV, streaming radio, and online banner ads. The return on investment from that campaign is $73 return for every dollar we invested. One of the objectives of the CVB is to educate our local residents on what there is to do in KCK. It's kind of a vacation in your own backyard thinking. This year we took one of our leisure campaigns that was originally targeted to our social media audience, and we turned it into a very successful in-market campaign. It was 94 days of summer, and it was a checklist of 94 things you could do during the summer in KCK, and it ran basically June through September, the 94 days of summer. It consisted of a unique website landing page, blogs, summer digital magazine. We had a video and this checklist that honestly was very popular with families. Moms love the idea of having a checklist that their kids could do throughout the summer of the 94 different things to do. It also resonated really well with local businesses. who helped us distribute the checklist, and they promoted, engaged with us on social media using the hashtag KCK94days. We spent very little money on this campaign. It was less than $4,000 that we spent on paid social media, and we put one ad in the Kansas City Parent magazine. But the results were pretty impressive. We reached over 310,000 targeted people on social media, and we had 4,300 new likes and engagements on our social media accounts. The word of mouth feedback from our local attractions was also very positive, in that they were sharing stories with us of families who visited their attraction that they know would have not been there if it would not have been for the 94 days of summer. So we are looking right now and putting together our plans for our 2016 in-market campaign. Part of our strategies for all types of visitors we work with is to work with the media and travel journalists to create stories about visiting KCK. If you are reading through a magazine or an online publication or even a social media site, a personal endorsement is much more effective than a paid ad. It's just more believable. So I've written here a few of my favorite quotes from this past year from media that we generated from our office. And a big part of our work with the media is building relationships with these writers and these publications so that they begin to know us and know that they can come back year after year for more information. And working with the media can take many forms. Sometimes we just answer questions on phone. I had a call the other day, someone who was writing a story. She had a quick question. I was off the phone in 60 seconds, but I'd worked with her before, and she knew me. We provide them with photos for a story that they're working on. We will attend trade shows and meet with travel journalists, trying to encourage them to write stories about us. And then we actually host them when they are here in the community and take them to whatever it is that they want to write about. So I feel like I've been talking really, really fast. And there's so much more that I can share with you. I probably have. But it is impossible to go over everything in this short amount of time. And I want to make sure I leave plenty of time for questions. But I will tell you, we have one of the staff was in my office the other day, and we have some really exciting things that are coming down in the next few months that I'm going to be very excited to share with you. In the near future. And somebody was saying they were very overwhelmed, and they said, but it's a really good overwhelmed, because it was just so many exciting things that we are going to be unveiling in the near future. So with that, I will stop talking and let you guys answer questions.
Commissioner Walker?
I would just make a comment that this is, I've heard a lot of reports over the years, both as staff and then since I've been a commissioner. This data is more in keeping with what I felt I needed to have to evaluate your program. The more data you provide, the better. The dollar invested and the return on that investment is impressive. I just think it was a very good report.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Commissioner? Go ahead.
Yes, is there, as you look at the events and the groups that you that are either sent to us or that we go after, is there what you all would identify as a sweet spot in terms of the types of events, in terms of numbers, and or the actual dollars, total dollars invested in this?
Sure. Our sweet spot is leisure travelers. That's the majority of our visitors who are coming here. We do have a great market for the small meetings, the small events. I hear a lot of times, go after the sports events. The reality is our hotels don't want them. They usually don't want the amateur sports events. They tear up the hotels. They want a very inexpensive rate, and they put about 8 kids in every room. So it's not something, if I don't have the hotel rooms, it's hard for us to go after those amateur sports events. Our busy time is definitely through the summer months.
Sure.
when you start looking at our occupancy, I think our biggest area of growth is going to be those off summer months. If we can start attracting the events and have the venues where we can hold those off-summer events, I think that's probably going to be our biggest area of growth potential. What those are, I think that's something probably the board will be talking about in December. I'm not sure if I answered your question
No,
completely,
I
but.
was getting ready to ask, and so what would that look like, typically? So you just gave me the answer to that.
Well, I had a lady call me today, this is a perfect example, for an event that she wants to do next year, and she's sending me some more information on it in June. And she wants to be in the Village West area, and she has some very specific needs that I'm trying to find the right space for her. But the reality is, our hotels are pretty full in June. I said, do you have anything else? What do you have in September? What do you have in January, that you can bring me? And unfortunately, this is an outdoor event. So I think something that could bring those visitors here where they don't have to be here during the summer months. I don't know what that is.
What is our, and I'm sure it's in this information, I must have overlooked it, what is our capacity?
Our number of hotel rooms?
Yes.
We have 1,750 with 108, I believe, under construction.
Okay, I think, I did see that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Commissioner?
So 1,750 rooms, and that includes the rooms that are out west at Village West that are paying star bonds right now, and therefore that transient guest tax is not coming to the unified government. Is that right?
That's right.
So-
That's our total rooms in Wyandotte County.
So you're tracking that
Yes,
anyway,
yes.
regardless of whether we're receiving the guest tax or not?
Correct. We get a report we pay for. It's called the Smith Travel Report or the STAR Report. I can't see an individual hotel's information. I can't see how much transient guest tax they've paid. I can't really see anything, and most of them will not share. What happens is they share this with Smith Travel, and then they put it together in a report. It is the standard that everyone uses. It is the most accurate information about hotel statistics that's out there, and that's what we use.
Do you think that there's still plenty of market for more hotel rooms in Wyandotte County?
I think that we probably need to think about, do we want to keep building 100-room hotels? Because it limits the type of business that we can bring. That would be my best answer. And again, I think this is a great conversation. I have 2 board members sitting here. I think this would be a great conversation for us to have at our long-range strategic planning.
My last question is, what other ways does your staff work with the hotels and their employees? You mentioned the weekly update of the handout they could give to their guests.
Right.
Are there other things they do?
Yeah, we do. We meet with our hotels on a fairly regular basis. We also have, our hotels are provided the information for 2 hospitality training programs. One is put on by Visit KC that we actually partnered with them when that was created. And it gives those frontline workers the knowledge of understanding why good hospitality skills is important. If you're staying at a hotel and they ask the front line, what else is there to do? And they go, there's nothing to do in town.
Right.
It's that kind of thing. Also, the state of Kansas has one that we've just unveiled, and we're getting that information out to try to teach them more about why hospitality is important.
And part of the reason I ask that is because we travel a
Yes.
lot to small towns for very short stays, and we ask, that's the person we ask.
Exactly.
When we get there and we're hungry,
Yes.
we're like, where should we go eat?
Yes.
So that's why I ask that question.
Yeah. So we do offer those, and actually, we just had a conversation about some ways that possibly we can help encourage more of our frontline workers to participate in those. And they're free. I mean, yeah. So.
Commissioner?
Bridget, I just want to take a moment to thank you and your staff for all the work that you've done to put this together. You and I have had many conversations as I've shared my frustration that I didn't think the CVB was telling its story clearly or thoroughly enough to us here in this room. And so I do appreciate telling a more thorough story. I'll echo what Commissioner Walker said a moment ago. I appreciate the information, the meat that's actually in this report. I appreciate a couple of new statistics that you just unveiled here that I hadn't seen on paper before in terms of ROI. And I really do look forward to finding more of those ways that we can measure the benefit that you provide to the community, not just in terms of the hotel rooms, but in terms of the total visitor experience and the total economic impact of those visitors across all of Wyandotte County. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. You had a slide of board members who you said were coming off. Do you have a tenure on your board for how long people are on there?
We do. You're making me think here. I believe they are 3-year terms, and after the third 3-year term, they do have to come off by our bylaws.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions? Yes.
Any suggestions on attractions that we should be pursuing that are lacking in this community that you think our visitors want?
Well, I think I already spoke to the time of year issue. You know, anything that's indoor that can be done during non-summer months is always going to help bring those visitors back during our low months. More shopping, that's just a personal, I like a lot of shopping. I think anything, you know, Verrucht is a good example of this slide brought so much excitement and interest in our community. I can't tell you how many people I spoke to from Germany. We hosted travel journalists from Germany who came here because of the German name. When we have the biggest, the best, that always brings people there back. So I will put some thought into that.
I think one of the missing pieces, and this is why we did our convention study, one of the missing pieces I believe out there is a convention center of some size that can bring people year-round and bring different kinds of events. I think that's in my estimation, it's the low-hanging fruit, though it's the high-hanging fruit in terms of cost. But I think that's the kind of thing, because I look at our 3 stadiums out there, which are terrific, and they're all empty in the winter. And we need a winter facility, some kind of indoor piece that brings people in large numbers. And I think a convention space would be a great add out there. And then what size space that is, where it's located, gets more complicated. But I think if we could have a convention center out there of some size, I think we would benefit year-round. And it would benefit us in the summer as well, but it would benefit us year-round.
Amen.
I don't get amens every day here, so I appreciate that.
Mayor, I also wanted to thank Bridget. As she mentioned, I have been working with her. Our club has been working with her for this small meet in September. But, you know, I think Village West is a wonderful place for car club meets. The one that I'm involved with has, you know, most people are going to spend 4 nights, maybe 50 to 70 rooms. And it's a nice place because there's a lot to do within walking distance, and it's the kind of things that people who go to these car clubs like to do. So that could almost be a little niche specialty, I think. If this goes well, we might you know, reach out to other car clubs for their regional, or as this will be an international meet. So I hope it goes well. And
Well,
thanks.
And I would say you referenced 100-room hotels. We haven't built any 100-room hotels. I mean, those the free market builds those without incentives. So all the, the 100-room hotels that are out there have all come on their own. Building a 250-room hotel is often when they look to the community to help. And so I'm delighted that all the hotels out there, not all of them, but the 100-room hotels that you're referencing have all been built without incentive, and they just see there's money to be made, and they come here to make it, and that's good news. So, all right, thank you very much. We appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
And we will move on to our next item. We're going to turn it over to Mike Taylor. We have a couple of legislative issues coming up. We will be meeting on December 10th. We'll have a dinner at 4 o'clock, and then at 5 o'clock we'll be in this room. And we're hosting with our commission our Kansas legislators from Wyandotte that represent Wyandotte County, both Senate and House of Representatives. And we're inviting them to come, and we're going to talk about our legislative agenda and walk through that with them. But it's a great opportunity for us to meet with our elected representatives to the state and build that collaborative relationship. There has been an interest in two topics, that have come to us. One is the gaming legislation that is around the the woodlands, horse and dog racing, and the other is this tax lid, this hastily placed, poorly thought out, impossible to implement tax lid that the state cooked up at the 11th hour and dropped on the state, that's completely unmanageable. So we're going to learn a little bit about that as well.
Yes.
But I wouldn't say that's one that we're interested in. It's just one that we need to understand better. But we do want to understand the gaming laws around the woodlands because it's more complicated than it sounds. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike Taylor to walk us through it. Doug, do you have any introductory comments you want to make about these?
Mayor, I think you covered really, the intent of this really was to focus on a couple of areas that are part of our legislative package, but one of them that has raised itself with a lot more attention is this of the gaming laws, and spending a little bit of time focusing on where our heads were when we took the position that we had on it, and then what's being proposed now, and that's where we felt like that's more time to spend just with you and talk through this.
Well, and I will say, this group adopts our legislative agenda, and so it's a vote like any other. So we have an opportunity to talk about the positions that we take. A lot of them have been on the books for a long time, but it's good to review them, and if you have any questions about any of our legislative items that you want more information on, you can reach out to Mike Taylor directly. If you think it's of interest to the whole commission, we can slate some time during a special session to go through it. So, Mr. Taylor, welcome.
Great. Thank you very much, Mayor and Commission. I'm going to give you kind of a big overview of the gaming laws, and then we'll get a little more into the specifics of the Woodlands and the Hollywood Casino. So, the Kansas Expanded Lottery Act was passed in 2007. That vote came at about 1 o'clock in the morning after a 12-hour filibuster by the Senate to barely eke it through. They've been trying to pass this thing for year after year after year. And I remember getting to call then County Administrator Dennis Hayes and then Mayor Reardon at 1 o'clock in the morning and waking them up. And I apologized. I said, but I think you want to hear this news. And they're like, what? Say that again. So it passed in 2007, and at that time it allowed for 4 casinos in the state: the Northeast Zone, which is Wyandotte County; Southeast Kansas, which they're still trying to get a casino built there; the Central Zone, which is just south of Wichita, and then out by Dodge City in the Western Zone. It also allowed slot machines at 3 racetracks in the state: the Woodlands, the Camptown racetrack down near Frontenac in southeast Kansas, and Wichita Greyhound Park, if voters approved that. Wyandotte County voters, of course, approved a casino with 81% of the vote in favor, and they approved slots at the Woodlands with 82% of the vote. So as a result, Hollywood Casino was built, and while initially celebrating that vote and the passage of this, the folks at the Woodlands never actually added the slot machines and eventually shut down the track. So what's changed, and why we're talking about this now, is this past legislative session, a bill that would drastically change the terms of the gaming laws that were adopted in the form of Senate Bill 192. It passed the Senate this year, and it now sits in a House committee. It's awaiting hearings. It's been sort of stalled by the Speaker of the House, who doesn't want to see the bill advance, but there will be a big push to try to move it through this session. For the past 7 years, the legislative program the Unified Government has taken this position on gaming. The Unified Government opposes changing provisions in the expanded gaming statute, including banning smoking on casino gaming floors. The Unified Government supports greyhound and horse racing operations with the addition of slot machines at the Woodlands under current gaming law. That's been the position for 7 years. The owners of the tracks, which is actually potentially one person, a casino owner in Vegas, Wichita resident named Phil Ruffin, owns the Greyhound Park in Wichita, owns Camptown, and has made an offer to buy the Woodlands. He hasn't closed on that yet, but he's moving in that direction. So he would like to see things changed. The reason that we took the position that we did, that I just read to you, is for several reasons. This bill and previous ones changed the fundamental financial landscape of the gaming laws. The landscape that the Hollywood Casino built its pro formas on, built its proposals on, and all of its investments on. So reopening the gaming law also would offer a lot of risks, because anything in that law, once you open it up, you say, well, we just want to change this one part. No, it's fair game for any amendment that might come from the floor. So the smoking ban could be implemented. And I know it's a little ironic we talk about that, but it's a competitive issue for Hollywood Casino, and that's why we've said that, because the 4 casinos across the state line allow it. And so,
I'd support smoking ban, but go ahead.
yeah, I understand. And it's a bit of a strange position given some other things we're doing, but the reason is the casino has made the case that it would kill us competitively. So, but it could also affect local agreements that we've made with the casino. So one of the positions that we've taken in this is that the Woodlands, under this law, under Senate Bill 192, would not be required to make any kind of a minimum investment or negotiate a developer agreement with us or make any kind of added local contributions as the casino was required to do. The other thing is Hollywood Casino has made it very clear, and in testimony has said, if the state changes this, they would consider it a breach of contract, and they would likely file a lawsuit against the state demanding their $25 million privilege fee back, and it could also then change the kind of monies that they contribute locally to the community, because it would affect the outcomes. And we'll get into more than that later. So what did the casino have to do? Here's what they were required to do. A $225 million minimum investment, a $25 million privilege fee. They promised to bring a second Sprint Cup race to Kansas City, Kansas, and would have paid a heavy financial penalty had they not been able to accomplish that. They promised to build the sports car road course in the infield, and they've already brought Grand Am type racing events here for that. They promised to build a hotel, and they are providing free Village West shuttle. Now here's the revenue distribution. They pay 22% to the state of Kansas, 3% to the city and county, which is revenue that we receive, but we also share with Bonner Springs and Edwardsville. They contribute 2% to the Problem Gaming Fund, a 1% of their revenues community contribution that comes to the UG. They are now, because they haven't yet followed through on the hotel, they're paying us a 1% penalty on the hotel, and that's totaling about $1.4, $1.5 million a year. And then they get to keep about 72% roughly for their profits and their expenses. But out of that 72%, they also give $500,000 a year to the non-host school districts. They give $500,000 a year in charitable grants. They give $100,000 a year to parks and recreation programs, $25,000 to the CVB, and another $10,000 to several chambers of commerce in the area. The Woodlands, under the current law, have no minimum investment to reopen, no developer agreements required, and no local added contributions are required. Under their revenue distribution under current law is they pay 40% to the state, instead of the 22. And that's their real complaint about this, is they have to give 40%, the casino only gives 22. They would have to give 3% to the city and county, 7% to the Greyhound Racing Fund, another 7% to a horse racing fund, 2% to the problem gaming, 1% to the county fair racing fund, and then they keep 40% for their owner profit and their expenses. Under the bill that's been proposed and passed the Senate, again, no minimum investment required, no developer agreement required with us, and no local added contributions. They would get to pay 22% to the state, which is equivalent to what the casino gets to pay. They would pay 10% to the horse racing fund, only 2% to the county only. So instead of, as under current law, 3% split by the city and county, it would be lowered to 2% and only go to the county side to the county. 1% to the racing fund. They would pay nothing into the Greyhound Fund. 0.5% to the problem gaming fund, where the casino has to pay 2%. And then they would get to keep 64.5% for their profits and expenses. So it significantly raises the amount of money they would get to keep. And the argument is, primarily from Mr. Ruffin, is that in order to make this doable, we need to be able to have these kinds of percentages. Now, what would that bring under Senate Bill 192? 60 days of horse racing a year, primarily in the fall. No Greyhound racing at the Woodlands. 2,800 slot machines, which would operate 365 days a year, 24/7. There would be simulcast betting on races year-round. There'd be no requirement for any other development or amenities, and no requirement for any other local contributions. That's a little hard to read. It's small, but yeah, it turned out a lot smaller than it looked on the screen. There was a question about sort of a brief history of the Woodlands. So I did some research through the Racing and Gaming Commission website, and I'll just kind of quickly run through this before we get to questions on this topic. But Kansas voters approved pari-mutuel betting in 1986. The Woodlands opened in 1989, as did Wichita Greyhound Park. In 1990, attendance at the Woodland hit its highest peak at 1.7 million people in 1990. In 1993, Missouri voters approved riverboat casinos. Some interesting other things that came to light. In 95, the operator of Hughes Kennels, operating out of the Woodlands, was charged with selling illegal steroids at the track, and charges were brought against him. In 1996, a number of employees were charged with accepting illegal out-of-state bets. Then in 1996, the Woodlands declared bankruptcy. So it really operated from 1989 to 1996 before it failed financially, although it kept running. In 1996, the city of Kansas City, Kansas, it was before the unified government, put an issue on the ballot trying under home rule to see if we could allow slots at the track under our home rule provisions. That vote passed overwhelmingly, and before it could be implemented, the state attorney general threatened to file criminal charges if the city of Kansas City, Kansas tried to implement that and go forward with that. So it never advanced. Then in 1998, William Grace bought the track out of bankruptcy. By the year 2000, attendance had dropped to less than 400,000 people. In 2002, state regulators accused several employees of stealing money from the track, over $200,000. Also in 2002, the original owner, a man named Richard Bushka out of Wichita, who built the track, was indicted for fraudulently obtaining $19 million in loans to build the Woodlands. And he did some prison time. In 2005, William Grace died, and then in 2007, Senate Bill 66 passed, allowing casinos to be built and slots at the track. In 2008, the Woodlands closed. 2015, this new bill gets introduced, and Phil Ruffin offers to buy the Woodlands and try to get it reopened. So that's kind of the quick history. It's an interesting history in the years that it was open. There currently is no horse racing and no Greyhound racing operating in Kansas at all at this time. Again, the future of Senate Bill 192, I'm not sure. It passed the Senate. Senator Fitzgerald, who represents the western part of Wyandotte County, Leavenworth County, part of our delegation, is the one really pushing that bill. He got it through the Senate. It got a really icy reception in the House. House Speaker Ray Merrick immediately put it in a committee called Calendars and Printing, which is, in sort of our vernacular, is where bills go to die. I mean, that's where the Speaker can manipulate and assign bills, and he puts it in that committee, it'll never see the light of day. Although there will be, I think, a number of attempts this year to try to revive it and bring it out and get it moving, which is why we're talking about this, because I know it's a big community issue. And I guess the big question as I'm putting together the legislative program is, do we want to keep the same position? Do you all want to change our position legislatively? So I kind of have the direction when we go over there to lobby on this issue, or to fight it, or say, no, we're working with them, and that's really your policy decision to make. So I'll stop there and allow any questions or statements.
Well, I will say I appreciate this presentation. I think it's very thorough. My concern has been all along that our casino, with its 900 jobs, I don't like the idea of it having this kind of, under the proposed bill, this kind of competition. If there were a minimum investment, if they were going to invest $100 million, for instance, into this facility, if they were going to bring in some restaurants like the casino has, if it were going to bring in some additional development, I think simply filling the current building with 2,800 slot machines that are going to operate 24/7, I'm not sure is a huge add to our community. I'm not sure that's a huge add. I think that I would like to see a larger kind of development, quality development, like what our casino has done. And our casino has been a great community partner. The current provision doesn't really require any partnership with the community. They don't require a development agreement. They don't require that investment. They don't require community contributions. And the number 60 for horse races, horse racing days, is that, in my understanding, the bill, that's a maximum number?
That's the maximum number that they would have to provide. I suppose they could do more if they wanted, but that's the number that they
That's the minimum number.
The minimum number, yes.
Thank
the
you.
minimum.
Okay, that's the minimum
Yes,
number.
sorry.
So you have 300 days where it's a slot parlor, and 60 days where it's a racing facility. So I just have some concerns in terms of the level of investment and how that would work, and keeping it on a fair playing field with our current casino, who has, I would say, by all respects, been an outstanding community partner.
Mayor?
Yes.
Well, I would note that at the time this bill was passed, the casinos that were interested in locating in our zone were well aware of the bill that allowed the Woodlands to operate. And so the idea that now we're in a protectionist mode is a little bit troubling to me. I don't, there are people in the metropolitan area that enjoy horse racing and undoubtedly enjoy the slots. Maybe not mutually exclusive, because horse racing is a much slower fix for people who like to gamble, just by the nature of it, and it is year-round. There are races all over the United States, and presumably those will be the simulcast. The problem is, we have this deteriorating blight on a prime piece of real estate near the Legends, in which, if Mr. Ruffin gets it, it strikes me that he's going to continue this effort. I mean, he's been continuing this effort, and nothing would suggest to me that if he doesn't get it this year, he's going to change his mind and stop trying to do it. I guess I'm asking, what is there that could be adopted in a bill that would level the playing field, then is there any chance of that being considered? I mean, again, had they opened up under the existing legislation,
Right.
there was nothing that Penn National could have done about it.
No, you're right, and they had no issue with that. I think the issue that's come about now is when the bill was passed in 2007, the people supporting casinos were involved in negotiating that bill, and this thing went on for 15 years before it finally passed. The people that owned the tracks at the time, and Mr. Ruffin was involved because he owned the Greyhound Park, agreed to these terms. Now, they would tell you that Governor Sebelius kind of told them, no, these are the terms, you're going to take them or leave them. So they say they didn't have a choice. But the fact is, they were at the table, and when the bill was signed, Governor Sebelius came here, and there was a huge celebration at the Woodlands, celebrating this bill. It was going to be the bill that saved the Woodlands. At that point, then, the Grace family, there were changes in their family with William Grace passing on, his son's taking over. They had less interest in running the track. When Phil Ruffin then sort of got in the mix, he's like, no, this doesn't work. We need to make more money. And that's really where this is coming from. The casino's point of view, and I think, Commissioner Walker, your phrase of protectionist view is one that I've been accused of over in Topeka for our position. I think the casino's point is these were the terms that they based the things they promised us on certain rules and percentages and profits, and they're saying now you're coming in and changing the contract unilaterally by doing this, and it changes the financial landscape. The casino believes, and it's probably true, although this could be debated, if there are 2,800 slot machines right up the street, a mile and a half from the casino, that will be competition for the casino, and they're likely to lose a lot of their customers to that slot parlor at the Woodlands. That affects the revenues they make, which affects their commitments to carry through on all the agreements they've made with us. That's really the crux of the argument from their point of view, and why we've taken the position we have that we'd love to see the Woodlands reopen, but you have to do it under the terms of the current law. And that's been our position. It can change.
Do you have any idea, in an approximate amount, the profit the Penn National has made from that casino?
Yes.
On an annual basis or last year?
Right. Yeah, they have to file reports monthly with the Racing and Gaming Commission. And let's see, year to date for fiscal year 2016, now keep in mind the state's on a July to June fiscal year. Total lottery gaming facility revenues, $35.3 million. They've paid $7.7 million to the state. They've paid over $1 million for the local share, and they've been able to keep $25.8 million.
So what are we looking at, roughly $100 million a year?
I think that's about,
Look, Mr. Levin?
Luke can tell us.
yeah, Lou. 140 million annually. And of course, that can change from year to year, but they have actually been gaining share in this market. Our casino, the Hollywood Casino, does not bring in as much revenue as the Kansas Star, which is just south of Wichita. And the main reason is there are 5 other casinos that they have to compete with in this market. The Kansas Star is the only one within a long ways. So,
Commissioner Philbrook and then Walters.
Kind of a catch-22, like Commissioner Walker said. We've got an eyesore out there that I hear about all the time from my constituents, and they're like, when are we going to do something about that? What can we do about that mess out there? Can't we clean that up? Can't we do anything? Well, I continually have to tell them, no, it's private property and we have no control over it. Now I have to consider what they're going to say if we completely stop that revitalization of that location, making them understand why or why not we're going to do that. And is it protectionism, or is it standing up to and going with an agreement that we already, have made, and we're staying within our integrity of what we've agreed to do. So I think this is a very complicated conversation for me along these lines. And the other thing is if they do open it back up, they've got that second building sitting there falling apart. What are they going to do with that? And they don't have to do anything with that building, do they? You know, I mean.
No, they wouldn't, although I know that Mr. Ruffin's been quoted publicly as saying that he's estimating to move ahead and open that he'd have to spend $50 million just to bring it back into some kind of shape that it could actually be used again.
Is he talking about using both buildings or one building?
That I don't know.
Well, that makes a big difference too, because you've got both those buildings sitting there. So anyway, I guess my attitude is that I don't want to back out on a deal that that we agreed to, and I don't want to set anybody else. I don't want to set somebody up to be making a lot higher profit than the partners we've been working with. So I have a little problem with that. And when we talk about protectionism, I mean, we could bring up a lot of other things that we operate under protectionism with. That could be how many liquor stores we have could get thrown into that category. So.
And again, the policy decision and what we have in our legislative program is your decision to make. And so hopefully this presentation has helped sort of lay out some of those issues for you to decide. And again, just to clarify, in the current law that's on the books, the reason the casino has to pay more to the state, I mean, the reason the track has to pay more to the state than the casino is because the casinos are required to make significantly hundreds of millions of dollars in initial investments that the tracks aren't. And so that was the rationale for that is.
Yeah, go ahead.
to even that out.
Commissioner Markley wants to follow up on that question if you're okay with that.
Was there an actual formula used to show that 40% matched up to the amount of investment? I'm just curious, was there like mathematics involved, or was it more like you get to keep less, we're going to pull a number out of the air kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a good question, Commissioner. I don't really know. I wasn't privy to those sort of behind-the-scenes negotiations. I know that as that bill was put together, the horse racing people were involved, the dog racing people were involved, the track owners, and then potential casino lobbyists for potential casino companies. So.
And I asked that because it seems like if there was some sort of formula, it makes it an easier deal to negotiate to say, okay, if you want to keep more, you have to make this amount of investment to make the formula balance out the way we originally intended. So it'd just be nice to know. If there's somebody out there in the world who was part of those negotiations, I'm curious.
One other issue behind this, and of course for the Woodlands, the greyhounds aren't an issue here, but the horse community has really gotten behind this issue. They feel like a lot of really competitive horses are bred and raised in Kansas. There's nowhere for them to race here, so they go to Texas or they go to Nebraska or other places. And they see this really as a way to help revive the horse industry in Kansas. That point's been debated on both sides of the issue by others. I don't have the knowledge to know if it really would help or not. I find it hard to believe that having just 60 days of racing is going to revive an entire industry in the state, but it would probably help some.
Commissioner Walters.
Thank you. I have a couple questions just to make sure I understand your terminology. You said that the casino had to spend over $200 million. And is that building their facility?
They had to make a minimum investment of $225 million, and that's land, building, and then they also committed to bring the second Sprint Cup race.
But you said that the Woodlands paid zero. So surely they spent some money building their facility. Why is it represented as zero?
Well, I think because that facility had been built long before this law ever passed, so it was already an existing facility. But
okay. Well, so they also would have to spend more or some money to bring it back.
Right.
50 million or whatever the number is.
That's right.
Probably shouldn't be represented to us as zero, should it?
Well, what I'm saying is where the casinos were required to even be considered to get a license, they had to commit to a $225 million investment. To get a racing license to reopen Wichita Greyhound Park or the Woodlands,
Okay.
they don't have to make any commitment to invest anything. Now,
Well,
they
I
would
think-
obviously
I
have
think I
to,
understand
but,
what you're saying.
right, I'm saying there's no required minimum as there was for the casinos.
Not to say that they might not spend just as much as,
Certainly, I
the
mean,
casino.
they could do, they could build other amenities out
Sure.
there by their own choice. I guess the point is, and the argument with the law is, they're not required to under the law where the casinos work.
okay,
That's
so
the that's the
that
argument.
sounds like terminology to me. So the current law, if I'm recalling correctly, you're saying that the casino keeps 72% of its gross revenue,
Roughly, yes.
and the Woodlands would be able to keep 40% of its gross revenue. Was that correct?
Right.
And that's the current
Well,
law?
under current law.
Under current law, that's
Under
what I said.
under the proposed law, the Woodlands would keep
Well-
64.5%.
Our policy references the current law, and I think that's
That's
what.
right, it
That's
does.
what we need to think about is the current law that says the casino can keep 72% of its revenue, but the Woodlands can keep 40% of its revenue, is the reason that the Woodlands is sitting empty today. Or if you believe the testimony of the people involved and just the naked eyes observation, if there was money to be made under the current law, somebody would probably be stepping forward to make it. The fact that it's been in existence for so many years and has resulted in an empty building leads me to believe that we should be advocating for changing the current law in some respect. I don't know how many slot machines are allowed in the current law. Do you?
It's slightly less than the 2,800. This bounces it up to 2,800 for the tracks. I think it's around 2,500 or 2,600 under
I
current.
thought it was a lot less than that, but you said that the citizens of Kansas City voted to allow slot machines at some point in the past? Do you
Yes,
know?
on more than one occasion.
Do you know if there was a specific number of slot machines in that ballot proposal, or? was it
No,
open?
the question that was put to the voters in 2007 was simply, there was two separate questions. One is, do you support construction of a destination casino, and do you support slot machines at the Woodlands? It didn't get into those kind of details in the
Well-
question, but
So my observation is that we got an empty building, and the current law is keeping it empty. I'm not too excited about 2,800 slot machines, personally. That sounds like an awful lot. But if we could engage with the legislators in some way to make it known what our preference is, I think that would be better than to just stand on the sidelines and say, we don't want any change, because that's essentially what our policy is saying. We don't want any change, and the Woodlands will remain vacant. I think that the percentages of revenue that goes to the state and the percentages that goes to the horse facilities, those are all something that we probably don't have a whole lot of stake in. That's for other people to negotiate. But I think we should be proponents of trying to get the Woodlands reopened, whatever that takes. And I think it probably will take a revision to the tax structure. I don't know if it requires that we would have to increase the number of slot machines if the number is truly as close as Mike seems to think it is.
Commissioner, I found it. The current law would allow them to have 2,200 machines initially, and then there would be a bidding process for the additional 600 machines. The casino could actually bid and try to outbid the track to secure those additional 600
Okay.
machines, to prevent
So-
the track from having them. Under Senate Bill 192 that's there now, the track would automatically get the 2,800 machines.
Okay, so we're talking 2,200 versus 2,800. To me, I don't see that that's a big difference. The one thing that it sounds like this commission is saying is that we don't want the tax formula to be changed. And I don't know why we would take that position. That's all I'm saying. Thanks.
Commissioner Walker.
I agree with you, Jim, that there is a formula, I would think, that would work better, both for the developer. I mean, it's easy to say all this, and getting anything through the legislature is going to be difficult. Clearly, I don't think 2% to the county and nothing for the city. It's a city expense. City services are utilized. A development agreement is essential because some of the things that we got through negotiation because the law was silent on it. But to say flat that under no formula of division of revenues, we would be opposed to it. I can tell you that I don't like the current proposed bill, and I don't want to support that bill with that language. On the other hand, some beneficial use of that Woodlands facility, and I don't know if Jim knows or the newer commissioners know, how much is it, Doug? Is it 13 acres or is it that big? That piece of ground that we own in front of the Woodlands?
It's actually 35 acres.
35 acres. We own 35 acres right in front. And, you know, one of the reasons I'm surmising that we've never been able to interest anyone in developing it, except initially the Wyandottes looked at it because they thought they would acquire that and then they would acquire the track and it would become Indian territory and then they could do whatever they wanted to on it. But is that you have the Woodlands behind you, which is deteriorating. I guess what I'm saying is Jim's idea that that we need to do something with the Woodlands and help it become viable, I agree with, and I can't believe there isn't a numbers crunch that while it may not be, you know, the best to have it that close to the gaming facility that they could live with. They were going to have to live with it anyway. Or maybe they knew from the very beginning with that number division that nobody would open it. But had somebody gone in there and opened up with 2,200 slot machines, what would they have done differently? I mean, I'm sure hindsight they would say, but we would have a development agreement and we would have these additional revenues coming in and so forth from the Woodlands as well as from the facility. And this bill is clearly an attempt to keep us from benefiting in any material way over and above what we were benefiting before. I guess I'm just not a hardliner on, nope, we don't want to open the bill. I would say we can open the bill, but not with those numbers. I would have to oppose that existing bill.
Commissioner McKiernan and then Bynum.
I would agree with Commissioner Walker here, not as is currently proposed. A couple of things occur to me. First of all, we seem focused on reopening the Woodlands as a gaming facility. It's a building. It's a piece of property. It could be redeveloped into something else. Not that it could be done easily necessarily, but I think it's short-sighted and kind of myopic to say, well, it has to go back to be what it was before. So we get past that. One of the things that's troubling to me is that it has the appearances that one or more people who were involved in crafting and getting past the 2007 legislation are now attempting to undo what they participated in creating. And it gives the appearance of setting a high bar when you're in one circumstance and then trying to lower that bar when your circumstances are different. Now, I don't know if that's the truth, but that's certainly the appearance that it gives when one or more people are involved in both setting up and then taking down that legislation. Like Commissioner Markley, I'd love to get some sort of a better appreciation of comparative value. The $250 million initial investment with investments in maybe redoing that facility. What's the comparative value of all that investment? But one of the things that does trouble me is that under our current agreements, the community does benefit not only by having a destination for people to go to, but benefits monetarily. And it certainly appears that under this new arrangement, this new law, the community would not gain a similar monetary benefit from the existence of this facility, and theoretically could stand to lose some of what it already gets from the existing facility. So, as Commissioner Walker said, certainly not an easy fix to this. It is quite a thorny problem, but I want to say that I'm concerned on several levels that there seems to be some switching here, and that we stand as a community to lose from the bill as it is currently written, and what then could happen after that.
Commissioner Bynum?
I have questions, just going back to the presentation you made. The Senate Bill 192 as proposed would not include what we used to call Track East. There would be no charitable fund?
No, there would not.
Because they did used to in the years that
That's
they
right.
were operating.
And that
And I
came-
thought it was required by law.
It was under the initial 1986 parimutuel gaming law that was approved by voters to change the Constitution, and the tracks had to give a percentage to charitable
Charity.
causes. Wichita Greyhound Park did the same thing.
Right.
So did Camptown really didn't, because it was only open for about 3 months before it was closed down.
So that does not
No,
exist.
none of that is required
the
under this
current
legislation.
proposal, okay.
Right.
Senate Bill 192, who is the author of that legislation?
Well,
Do we
Senator
know?
Fitzgerald was the one who really promoted it and carried it in the Senate. Now, who actually drafted the bill? I'll be honest with you, I think it was probably Phil Ruffin and his folks.
So, has Senator Fitzgerald or anyone proposing this met with any person that's at this table? Has Senator Fitzgerald come to you, Mayor, or you, Mr. Bach, or any of you?
Well, I can say no from my perspective. I will say I talked to a representative from Dodge City, and when I ran into him at another event, and he was talking about how excited he was to get the Woodlands open, and I said, we have some concerns about that. He said, really? I thought you guys would be, I was assuming you guys were all in on this. And so I said, well, there are layers, it's not a simple math problem. I mean, there's layers to it. So no one has reached out to me. Now, I think more recently, has someone reached out to you now, Doug, in the last couple of weeks?
Well, I wasn't really a reach out. I just was at an event where I met Senator Fitzgerald and talked to him a little bit, but it wasn't a reach out. It was more introduction, and we talked about this a little bit from that standpoint. Now, I have had, since that time, we have had representatives of Mr. Ruffin's team reach out to staff and approaches about moving forward with activity at the Woodlands facility. They indicated they had a strong feeling they would move forward with the purchase of it, but they weren't there yet. And they also indicated that they were looking to reinitiate or come back and ask for a special use permit on the site. Indications were that they would do that under the current gaming legislation, though they kept it qualified from the perspective that they intended to change before they would do that, but that may be a step they move forward with. And one thing, as you look back on Mike's historical information that he put up there, an initial special use permit was issued on this site, which is a criteria you would have to go through from a planning and zoning perspective. Now, that was issued to Sunflower Gaming or whoever it was, an entity that no longer exists today. And the criteria for which it applied to the Woodlands area was also one where it had dogs and horses, and that's what it was for. So it's not like it's a renewal of an existing one, because what that was issued for changes from where it is today. But they're, you know, it was a very good conversation with them. You know, they're looking for redevelopment of a site, which would be very promising from our area, but their emphasis is toward gaming. And to Commissioner McKernan's point, we've never been in control. We've thrown different things out at this site. The owners of this property have always kept their eyes back on something with gaming in the future.
A question that I need help understanding. Why is it that the Woodlands would not require any sort of development agreement such as was created with the casino? Is it because it's an existing building? I heard you say there is no required development agreement.
There's no requirement in the law, and if you recall back during the casino selection, there was a huge competition. So every casino company was trying to outdo the other one, which of course allowed for those kind of negotiations. I don't think there's nothing in the law that would prevent us from reaching out to Mr. Ruffin and saying, we'd like to do a development agreement with you and work something out. What I'm saying is the law doesn't require any of him to do any of the same kind of things it required of the casino.
I think that we probably stand in agreement that seeing the dilapidated buildings are not helping the community. So to that end, a discussion would be welcome. The question I have is, at what risk of losing what you've reported here that Hollywood Casino has already stated they might do as a result of changing the law? So that's the question I think we have to grapple with. We have a dilapidated building.
2 of them.
That we would like to see redeveloped, and we have to balance the risk when we open the conversation about Senate Bill 192 and what it could potentially look like against what Hollywood Casino has said, if you do this, we might do this. And I think that's an important conversation to have.
Commissioner Walker.
You know, I want to make a point here, because I'm sure most of the commissioners are vaguely aware. I actually think they invested more than the $225 million. At the time of approval, their investment proposal exceeded the minimum threshold. If you will recall, they claimed that $100 million of that investment was the land the casino sits on. Now, I want to also make the point that given that was their commitment that induced at least 4 of the 7 people on the approving authority to vote for their proposal over the Edwardsville site, one would have thought that their tax liability would have been based on the cost as built. $100 million for the land, and then whatever the remainder of their investment is. It's my recollection, and Doug, you can correct me, that even though they claimed that they were making a $100 million contribution, I guess that would be from ISC, when it came time to pay the taxes, the ground wasn't worth anywhere near $100 million, nor is it on the books for $100 million, or has it appreciated in value because of the amount of money they make. So even though I'm very happy with the casino, they've done they've brought an element to the community that the people overwhelmingly wanted. If I built a $250,000 house, I would be paying taxes on a $250,000 house. They're not paying anywhere close to the taxes on what that facility was worth, and at the same time making $140 million. Is that year to date, or was that just the last?
That's
year?
annually, yeah.
Annually is the
140 million, and they're not paying taxes on 140 million either. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Commissioner Walters?
I'm really glad we're talking about this because as Mike said, this has been our policy for 7 years, but this is really the first discussion of it that I can even recall. And I think that I think it's really good for us to think about what we want out of this possibility of a facility reopening. I do think it's hard to keep everything straight when Mike is literally talking about what's included in one piece of legislation versus what's included in another piece of legislation, because not every topic is included in both, but it doesn't mean that they're excluded. So I don't know how to go about this, but I think we need to think about what we want and take a position accordingly. And if it means a development agreement must be enacted, if it means, we support taxes going to the city and the county. Those are the moving parts that I hear everybody talking about. I think those are extremely valid, and I think we need to get our ideas and conditions, if you will, on the table so that we can be a part of the discussion rather than just saying we don't want anything to change.
I got one final comment, Mayor.
Okay.
I'd like to have a report on how much money is going into the problem gaming fund, and what is it being spent on? Because even at the low percentages that are reflected, it's got to be millions of dollars that have been paid into that. And unless they're paying somebody's bad gambling debts, how many problem gamblers, or who's doing what with this money, and where is this money? Because this number, I don't even know why it's in the equation. If you're a problem gamer, they'll take you even if you're gaming over in Missouri. You're not even a problem gamer in Kansas. I just think it's a lot of money that's being plugged into something and then being used in a indecipherable way.
Well, and Commissioner, that issue's been talked about at the State House, whether that 2% is too much, and I think that's one reason that under Senate Bill 192, they're proposing that the track would only pay 0.5% into it. It's millions of dollars a year that go to the Problem Gaming Fund, and I really can't speak to you right now about how that's exactly spent. I know they've done some mass media campaigns, there's some billboards. Beyond that, I don't honestly know.
Yeah, 1-800-BETS-OFF. I mean, I'm sure they do that advertising.
Right.
See, it's
Look
effective.
what
So it's
look
effective.
what an impact it made.
See, you know it. You know the number. Well, I think we need to wrap up this conversation. But I think Commissioner Walters, to your point, the strategic question is exactly what you've raised. Do we continue to say, forget it, the law's there, take it or leave it? Or do we open the door to say we would support it under these circumstances? There is a legal risk, I think, with the current casino potentially suing the state in terms of changing the landscape. They could say they lose 5% of their revenues to this casino. I mean, they might be able to show a mark when this opens, their revenues go down X percent. Could they sue that for damages if the percentages were changed under a new rule different from what they came in? In part, that's our problem, and that our revenue is tied to their revenue, and the jobs in the community are tied to how much money they're making. So in some respect, it's a risk we take. The other piece is the risk with the state. I've been reading lately that the state needs money. And I think one of the risks that we've talked about is opening the casino bill again, the gaming bill again. They could go in and not only not give 3% to the city and county at the at the racetrack, they could say, well, we're not even going to give that locally. We're going to take that from the state. That the state's going to take additional revenue from the city county away. And I think that's a risk that we run. I don't want to say it's a crapshoot.
Thank you.
You get it? Gambling, crapshoot.
We get it.
Sorry. All right. But I think there's a legal risk. I think there is a risk in terms of revenue. But I think it is a legitimate strategic question. Is it smart to stay on the sidelines and not take any position other than no? Or do we put a proposal on the table that says we would accept it under these circumstances? That's the question for this group. And I think that's the question that we need to answer at some point between now and when the legislature reconvenes in January.
Yes. Preferably before that, because I'll be bringing you a legislative program. We'll talk about it on the December 10th, a draft of one, and then adopting it, in later in December, so that I have a plan. And as I said, it's your policy decision. Whatever you decide is what argument or position I carry over to the State House. So,
Commissioner McKiernan.
Well, and I go back to what Commissioner Markley said earlier, and I really do think if we can find some way to make a more apples-to-apples comparison of investment and payoff and all of that, then we try to find the middle ground between setting a bar that's too high for someone who wants to change versus lowering the bar, so to speak, for someone who's already here, and we can find that middle ground and see if that middle ground then is our best strategic place to be.
Commissioner Walker and then Commissioner Philbrook.
Are we going to have an opportunity to offer thoughts on other pieces of legislation?
Certainly, yes.
Absolutely.
And yes, Commissioner, and since about August, I've sent out kind of a number of emails asking commissioners, department heads for any suggested legislation. So yeah, anytime you would like to address that, feel free to send me an email. Yeah.
The problem with, it's like the way I did my homework in college. Until you're under the gun and the pressure, there's always something else that's front and center. And when you send something out in August, it's not due till January. It's kind of hard for me to get motivated to, put a lot of effort and thought into it. It's just the way I'm constructed. I can't do my homework in advance. I got to be right under the gun.
Maybe we could appoint a tutor, a homework tutor.
It would be wasted money.
I think on January 10th or December 10th, we are going to be here at this table with our legislators. If there is a policy item you want to float out, I would say send that to Mike now, and we can have the discussion and try to find some time between now and December 10th to talk about it.
Because, and I'll have that document to you a week before that meeting on the 10th, so you all have a chance to review it. And again, I'll put in proposed, those are all going to be proposed positions that I've heard from department heads or you all. It's totally up for discussion and to be changed because it's your document.
Commissioner Philbrook?
Did you want to say something first? Well, I was just going to say, I agree with most everybody else here. It's time for us to kind of get off of our laurels and actually have to do a little work around this casino stuff and accept some responsibility that, though we might have to change things. But I do have a point of information. The contract that we presently have with Hollywood, is it possible to renegotiate that? And I'm just asking that because, if there's something that we can change with them that would make it more palatable and also work with the other folks to come in so people are happier, then I just don't know if that's possible. That's the question.
Yeah, the contract we have with them is between us and Hollywood Casino. So if we wanted to open that up at the local level and work on that.
I think the point being is that I don't know that we need to be just stuck with, this is what we have and we're stuck here, kind of concept. And maybe it is that way, but if we just say it, then why are we even talking? So I just want possibilities.
Commissioner, the real contract that's there is with the state of Kansas, between the casino and the state of Kansas. And that's the breach of contract they're talking about. If the state passes this law and changes it, it would be breaching the contract they signed for a 15-year lease on operating this casino with the state, and that's who they're.
They're mad at the state, but I was just
Right.
curious if there's anything, any play we can help.
I was just going to add that on the presentation, as Commissioner Walker laid out, Mike can correct me and make sure we're following the format that the commissioners want, that we have as Mike lays out the format for this so we can advance what our program is, and then we have the legislatures here, then I believe, Mike, you'll walk through
Right.
not every issue we have in the program, but probably the top 7 or 8, I suppose, as you
Right.
come
We
through
generally
that.
have a priority issues that I put on one page that's kind of the hot issues for this particular session. The rest of it are kind of long-standing, more broad platform positions about home
So
rule.
as he
and
goes
other
through that, I mean, that's an opportunity not only to engage that with the legislatures about why we're strong on that or what our feelings are, you know, or if we want to take some exception, I guess, to our position, but I would hope we would let Mike know in advance if we're there.
All right, so if there are suggestions to how, if there's some folks that want to talk to Mike about possible legislative options around the Woodlands piece, I think now is the time to do that. If there's a position that we want to take, it is a legitimately complicated, I would say a legitimately complicated undertaking. So, all right, we do need to transition to the other piece, which I think is more troubling by far, which is the tax lid. I would also note we are 15 minutes from our 7 o'clock. It usually takes that much time to transition our technology. I would suggest, because our meeting's on December 10th, we need to continue with this conversation and potentially start our 7 o'clock late. We have done that a couple of times. I do like to end these on time and start our 7 o'clock on time, but I think this conversation is one that we very much need to have. So I'll turn it over to Mike,
Thank
and
you.
we may start the next meeting late.
And I can go through this pretty quickly. I'm going to give you kind of the background of what happened with the property tax lid, or as the supporters of this measure call it, the voter requirement bill. So what it does is, and this was rolled together with a number of the other tax changes that were passed at the very end of the session on the 114th day of a 90-day session, late at night. Beginning in 2018, cities and counties are prohibited from increasing property tax revenue above inflation unless you hold a public vote approving that increase. Now, they did put into that law a few exceptions. So if you have new growth in construction, your assessed value grows because you've added a $200 million soccer stadium to the tax rolls, or you've annexed, which is an issue for us, but for some cities, an area outside the city. So you've grown. They're saying, okay, that's okay. You can count that toward, because you're increasing revenues. State and federal mandates, the cost of that, bond and interest payments, and the payment of legal judgments. That's what got put into the initial bill. Some of that's going to change, and there's also already a bill I've seen a draft of that would move this to 2016, not 2018, and it would take away some of these exemptions. So this is my lobbying spiel that I've done to several groups, including the realtors who are pushing for this. The process to pass it was undemocratic. It was introduced after the 100th day of the session, after a senator dined with several lobbyists who were anti-tax lobbyists. The issue came up as a floor amendment at 2 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon. I was there when it was introduced. By 4 p.m. it was passed and in the bill. There was never a bill introduced. There was never a hearing. There was never any real debate, and the bill certainly wasn't vetted by anyone. It's unworkable because it wasn't vetted. So budget proposals generally are worked and introduced in June or early July with workshops and hearings throughout the month of July. The budgets are generally adopted around August 1st, assessed values certified August 25th. Well, how do you hold an August 1st election if you haven't even adopted your budget yet? And how do you know if it's going to be an increase in the mill levy above the CPI? So that doesn't work. You can't have an August 1st election. You would have to then out of necessity, either hold a special election, which is very expensive, or do a November 1st election. Well, the election commissioner needs at least 60 days to prepare the ballot. So if you just look at that timeline, it doesn't work with the budgeting cycle as spelled out by state law. Also, the Military Voting Act requires overseas military personnel receive their ballot 45 days before an election. I mean, without getting too deep, if you just think about that, the cycle, it doesn't work at all. How do you hold an election if you should go over that CPI? So what would happen then is you would, I suppose, have to have a November election, and if it fails, you're sitting there November 1st having to start over with an entire new budget proposal. A lot of the counties don't like that because the clerks have to get the tax notices prepared and sent out, and in most counties, other than the 4 largest, they are also the election official. And so they're having a lot of fits about this because they're like, how do we get values certified, get tax notices prepared, and prepare for a special election? So it's totally unworkable. It's actually unnecessary. There's already the Truth in Taxation law, which requires an extra vote if you exceed the previous year in the Consumer Price Index. Supporters of this claim that if this had been in place since 1999 when the former tax lid went away, that taxpayers in Cross Kansas would have saved $5.8 billion in property tax increases. It's totally a myth. And the reason it is they're counting every increase that happened in the state over that 15-year period. That means new growth, new construction. It means bond issues that were approved by voters to build a new community swimming pool. And my argument is, to be fair, you need to extract those numbers from this total number to give the real increase. And the fact is, from 2004 to 14, local property taxes across the state went up 7%. That includes new construction growth and approved bond issues. So first-class cities, the 25 largest in Kansas, raised property taxes 3% when adjusted for inflation and population growth. And in those cities, those 25 cities, the population over that time period grew 10%. So you've got a 10% growth in population and only a 3% growth in the property taxes.
Was there a recession between those years as well?
I believe there was, yes. Yes. So new growth and construction is positive, but it does come with a cost. I mean, if your community grows, you might have to build a new street or a new turn lane or hire some more police or firefighters and do that kind of thing. The numbers that they're counting don't include for any of that. It's also clearly a violation of local control, and it's interesting because the majority of the Republicans say they support smaller government, less intrusion, less regulation. They rail against the federal government having any kind of mandate put on them, whether it's environmental regulations, Affordable Care Act type things, the lesser prairie chicken being declared an endangered species. They scream and yell about it. But yet, they don't hesitate to turn around and meddle in the business of local government and trample over all of our local control. And I have no problem saying it here to you because I say this in testimony to them all the time. And I have to remind them that there is a home rule amendment in the Kansas Constitution that was approved over 60 years ago by the voters of Kansas. And that was a small government measure. That was local control. Decisions by our locally elected officials is better than decisions being mandated from Big Brother in Topeka or in Washington. Here's another thing that's hypocritical about this is the state, of every tax bill you pay, 1.5 mils of that goes to the state of Kansas. Well, they didn't require themselves to have a public vote. So what they do is they would be able to reap extra dollars from an increase in the mill levies, but we wouldn't be able to. And the other point that they don't make is from 1998 to 2013, the property taxes collected by the state increased 67%. The property taxes collected by the largest 25 cities increased only 3%. And if you remember, they raised the sales tax this year. They didn't require a public vote to do that. They just did it. So, and I make points, and you all know this, but this is to other groups. I think local governments have shown that we are efficient, we are responsible. And the fact is, they don't like it when I say this, and they look, I said the biggest reason for property tax increase in the state of Kansas is the Kansas legislature. How can you say that? Well, let's look at the legally obligated funding that you've welched on, the LAVTR monies that you haven't paid, which is now coming close to $2 billion since they stopped paying it to all local governments in Kansas. Let's look at repeal of the property tax on machinery and equipment. That didn't cost the state, that cost local communities, and it's cost our community hundreds of millions of dollars in assessed value. They've stopped the mortgage registration fee, which is going to cost us several $1,000,000. And then, of course, there was the loss of property values due to the recession. So property tax increases came because of a reason, and I argue primarily it's because of things the legislature has done to us, not because we're just out there, as they like to say, spending money like drunken sailors.
Our revenues show in the last 10 years we've averaged $6 million in losses from either state revenue or state policy changes, which is about $60 million over the last 10 years in direct loss to the unified government.
That's right, yes. So what we're calling for is, because the tax lid, it's unworkable, it's unnecessary, it's a violation of local control, and it was passed in an undemocratic way that was really done secretly with no hearings. We're going to introduce legislation. I say we, I mean the League of Municipalities, the Association of Counties, not just the unified government, a bill that would repeal this law. We think probably that's not going to happen, so we're working on a plan B, which is to at least try to make it workable and get some other exemptions, exceptions put in there, and we've got a whole list of them. The fact is, even if this goes ahead, it's got to be fixed because the election requirement doesn't work.
Well, and the other piece that I think is infuriating, when we build a healthy campus downtown, in downtown Kansas City, Kansas, $30 million capital investment in downtown, one of the goals is it would raise property values around it. You cannot capture the increased property values of our own development. So we have invested in our urban area. Indian Springs, another example. When we redevelop Indian Springs, it will raise property values in the properties around it. We will not be able to capture that grown value because of the investment we made without going out to a public vote. And so it's an anti-investment, anti-growth legislation. This is the other challenge they've given us. We're looking right now for next summer, how much of the $12 million in Star Bond revenue payoff do we apply towards reducing our mill levy? Can we reduce our mill levy when we can't raise it again? It's put us in a bind. They have disincentivized us to invest in our community. They have disincentivized us to lower our mill levy. They have created a really toxic top-down environment at the state on local control. I mean, there's so many layers of problem to this, and did not impose it on themselves. They can capture all. We can grow our city, and they'll benefit from our growth in our city, but we won't.
Right.
And that's a problem. So I think our long-term strategy is to reduce our mill levy down to a competitive rate. Well, they've disincentivized that for all communities to lower mill levies at all. And it doesn't just hurt the unified government, it hurts our school district. While they're cutting money for the school district, it does not allow the school district to capture new revenue either. It also constricts our community college. All of the groups in our community are going to be hit very hard by this piece of bad, really toxic legislation.
Well, and this also, Mayor, applies to drainage districts, library boards, other kinds of taxing entities if they have a budget that's over $1,000. So, and I think that's just being learned, that this really has a far-reaching effect. I mean, it's easy to say, okay, well, it affects the city of Wichita, it affects the unified government, the Shawnee County. Yeah, but it also affects all these little entities, drainage districts and improvement districts, townships. So.
And I would point out there have already been local elections, and they elected this board to make these decisions. And if we make bad decisions about taxes, I can assure you the voters will come to the polls and let us know.
So,
all right.
That's all I have on this.
What a mess.
I will be proposing in the legislative program as our #1 issue that we get the tax lid repealed. And that joins the Greater Kansas City Chamber. I presented this to them. They've taken that position. The KCK Chamber will take that position. Actually, the Kansas City area realtors took a position that flew against what their statewide organization wanted. They're at least saying leave it at 2018 and add a lot more exemptions to it. So we were effective there as well. So we've got some support out there, but it's mostly the anti-tax folks, the people that you would suspect, the Americans for Prosperity, Kansas Policy Institute that are pushing this.
All right. Anything else from this group? We'll end on that happy note. It will take us some time to convert our technology downstairs. We will begin downstairs at 7:15.
A lot of fun this job.